Hi, welcome to Casual Yelling, Casual Conversation podcast with 85% less yelling. I'm Ed Elfring. With me today is from Atomic Mass Games, Ross Thompson and I, Ross.
What's up, man?
You figure after 20 years of doing podcasting, I wouldn't botch the entire intro every time.
Nah, it's all good. How funny.
So how are you? Even though I already asked you that twice before we started recording. This is the how are you on the show.
It's the official how are you, right? So yeah, I'm good, man. Like it's been good. Just keeping busy. We're in like the first quarter con season kind of finished up now. So now we're all gearing up for our like May, July, August stuff. So it's good, never a dull moment.
Tell us about Atomic Mass Games, because that was something I didn't really become aware with until I went to Adepticon.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. So I work at Atomic Mass Games, and we do the miniatures games for Star Wars and Marvel. So we do Star Wars Shatterpoint, Star Wars X-Wing, Star Wars Armada, Star Wars Legion, and then we do Marvel, what's the protocol? So it's all super good stuff.
Yeah, I found myself like Adepticon, for those who aren't aware of it, and I wasn't aware of it like 2 weeks prior to it. It's just essentially a gaming and painting con. You go there and you could buy Warhammer. It was so much Warhammer, and I'm not a Warhammer guy.
Oh, yeah,
but
a lot of Warhammer.
You can buy miniatures. I spent a lot of money on Turbo Dark paint, like I tend to. Army Painter had a bunch of stuff there.
Greg and Meredith are awesome, so totally get it. Oh, yeah.
And I found myself staring at your booth a lot, not knowing like it's the company you worked for, because there was like a miniature Sandman there, and I was like, "Oh my god, look at all these Marvel things happening!"
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, we part of the cool thing with that show is we have our painting competition called The Worthy. So it had a bunch of our studio stuff there. We've got early releases and stuff like that, but then also like the attendees can all enter in for the painting competition. So we've got all Marvel different stuff going on there, which is pretty rad.
And you all are selling these aren't pre-painted stuff. This is all
so it's a full hobby kit, right? So I was just working on some stuff over here, but so you get to build it and paint it and do all that. I have my miniatures case right here, right? So it's like it's got my different stuff on it and everything there, which is fun. So
this is where I come up and say, not sponsored by Atomic Mass Games. The fact there's a banner on this show shows you how many times I've interviewed people in places like 2 weeks ago when I interviewed like 2K Games about something. I had to put it not sponsored. Every time I interview someone, I have to say it is not sponsored by those people or sponsored by the NES game Yonoid, which has come up on this show way too much.
Oh, cool.
Cool. So, like I said, I was aware of the Golden Demon Award for like as I got into mini painting. Never knew about Adepticon until this year, which a friend told me like, hey, there's this like mini painting convention going on.
Just a small convention, only 8,000 people. Yeah.
He was telling me, he's like, yeah, I went a couple of years back, and it was in a convention, like hotel convention hall, but there weren't many people there. And we got there, and it was the most amount of people in a small convention hall I'd ever dealt with.
This was the biggest show they'd had in a few years for sure, right? So it was like 20,000 or 20% more than years previous. So I think it was about 8,000 people at the show. And I've gone for years, sometimes by myself and then sometimes for work, depending on where I was working at. But Adepticon is one of those cool shows where it's like if you want to get a really good look at the state of tabletop miniatures games in the U.S., that's the show for it, because they've got the big players, obviously, like with Atomic Mass Games and Games Workshop coming for Warhammer, but also you get a lot of the cool indies that are there. So you get like Sean Sutter from Metal King Studios, who's got Relic Blade going on. You've got Malev, who's a big part of the Black Site Studio stuff, and so they've got his like solo miniatures game stuff with like Pit Lord and Demon Ship and stuff like that, and then. Like everybody's there. Arena Rex is there, and so on. Of course, like Mantic came out with their new Halo stuff too, which is kind of cool. And so it's neat that right. But it's cool because you get to see all this different stuff for minis games, and so like I think one of the big trends this year was painting. There were like 3 or 4 new paint lines that got announced too. So like obviously Monument Hobbies is there, and Turbo Dork with Meredith and Greg, but then like AK not AK but the Atom paint line that's got announced, which is super cool.
Yes, yeah.
And then, of course, all the painting influencers are there, right? So you get your Ninjons and your Goober Towns and your Miniacs, and they're all there. But because of how Army Painter is doing their new painting series and Monument doing their influencer series too, you get to kind of meet all those folk and do those things there. Like it's one of those weird things you're gonna crack up. So like growing up at the game store, like I used to work there and stuff like that. But Aaron Lovejoy used to be a local for us. So like whenever we wanted to like just hang out, there's Aaron just like painting away. And we go, yeah, Aaron won a Golden Demon. Like when we were growing up, like, oh, yeah, Aaron, it's Aaron Lovejoy, whatever. And now that I'm like working in the space, I'm like, man, I should have been painting with Aaron so much more. Like, because he's like doing studio models for like half these companies. And I'm like, oh yeah, Aaron Lovejoy, who could take purple and then make a face amazing. And now I'm like, man, I really should have gotten better at painting when I was in my formative years by painting with that guy.
Like, and that's the thing I noticed, like after I left Adepticon, we were there for a few hours and I was really worried about my car getting towed because it wasn't a parking facility for office.
Yeah, for sure.
No. And every car next to mine had that yellow sticker on it says violation. And I'm like, I can't get those off. My car lucked out and didn't have one. But so we walked around and we were looking at some of the early Golden Demon stuff. We were there on Thursday.
Right.
And like, I remember at one point being, I was with my friend Tyler, being a little judgmental asshole about one of the paint jobs on something.
Yeah,
I'm like, oh,
it's fun.
Yeah, but here's the problem with that. So I'm just like, oh, this person over here kind of missed this area. Like, I'm not a great painter. I'm okay.
Sure.
And then I look up and it's like kids under 15. I'm like, oh, now I'm an asshole.
Oh no!
Also, they're much better painters than I am currently.
You're like, oh wait, there's a whole new context. You're like, oh, this 15-year-old is that two-tone shading? Oh, I can't even do that, right? Yeah, you're just.
I very loudly announced to people around me in line. I was like, I'm the asshole here. I didn't know. I'm the like.
There's a certain like. It's just fun to like get in line and then go walk through and look at the Golden Demon like you're looking at the zoo, right? And it's as that case fills up over the show, it's really cool, especially with how the online community, depending on like where you are in the certain spaces, you can see a lot of those things get painted throughout the year. And it's neat when they finally show up in person. So Ninjon just released a YouTube video that shares his whole like path of how he got ready. Because, like you can't just show up for a Golden Demon. We're not a Richard Gray, right? Like doing that kind of stuff there. So it's cool when you get to like see the prestige of all of that too, which we get to do with the Worthy as well, right? And like with AMG, and we get some paint jobs where you're like, oh yeah, there's that one I've been seeing online, and then now it shows up in person. And you're like, oh, look at the story and the narrative that's being told, because there's so many parts of this hobby that are lifestyle-ish, right? Like, oh yeah, we buy the miniatures, we paint them, we play them, it's great. But then like, there's the people that travel the world to play the game, and there's the people that really want to like embrace the painting and do all these things. And I've got friends that I've met when I was like 16, 17 that are friends for life because of miniatures games, right? And so it's kind of cool how that all just kind of traverses. So
and when I was like leaving Adepticon and I got home and I was kind of looking at like who was all there, I saw that Ninjon was there. I'm like, like I don't think he was there the same day as me. But then I saw the same day as me, Black Magic Craft was there, and I love his YouTube channel. And I was really pissed because I was like 20 feet away from him at one point, apparently, and didn't notice him. I bumped into you, which was nice because I think we were talking for about a year on and off, kind of. Mm-hmm. I don't remember how. I think it was probably like after I lost my job, and you're like, here's jobs in this industry.
Well, we had met online back when you were still writing. And I had sent some pitches, and then it just didn't match because of what you were writing for and that. But it was back when I was in my like, oh, anybody that writes in games, I'm just going to message and then see what happens.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Right. And then when you get laid off, and I was like, hey, I run this jobs group, like get in this jobs group. Right. So, which is, but then of course you walked up and I was right there on my little walking the show floor. So.
Because I knew that'd be the only chance I'd see. I'm like, oh shit, Ross, hey, high five, and keep walking. Because
you got a selfie, it's all good.
yeah, that's all you need. It's just a good high five, and then Penguin walk down the rest of the halls.
Right? Yeah, I mean, pretty much, right? And so it's Yeah, it's cool. Like that show is a good vibe because like Gen Con is cool too, but it's 70,000 people, so we're always just like
No, thank you.
and it's everything. Where Adepticon literally is like it's just all miniatures, and it's really cool. I look forward to that show growing because they're going to be moving to that new space in Milwaukee,
Not
right?
happy
And
about that. Not happy. That is hours away from my house. Adepticon was 30 minutes from my house.
well, as a San Diegan, I got to travel no matter what. So, you know,
Yes.
but I think the potential for that show to grow is
Yeah.
cool because we're seeing in the space, right? Like more people are getting into miniatures games now than ever before. GW can't keep stuff in stock. We're having problems making sure we can get everything. Like just people are buying, playing, right? And so uh and it's how do you create more of that vibe and energy and get more folk into it, right? And so having I don't know, obviously Milwaukee is not like a main hub, so it's not flying into Chicago and then just calling it a day. You got to go to do a whole
Yeah.
thing, but it allows them to find that space. I used to run a gaming convention for like 10 years in San Diego,
Hmm.
and we grew from like 200 people to about 1,700 people, right? And we fit in our hotel. It was great, but we hit a point where it was like if we wanted to go to that next evolution of the show, we would have had to move and find a new space and do a new thing.
Yeah.
And Adepticon, as you brought up with the parking, had already maxed out that Schaumburg space that they just had like years ago. So, and they were doing overflow into the other hotel. And so they're paying for that shuttle to shuttle people back and forth. And I guarantee you that's not cheap, right? So
No.
so how are they going to grow if they want to be a real show? Because the only really like, you look at a PAX East or a PAX Unplugged, and it's like, okay, even those shows aren't even near the Gen Con level, but there aren't many
No.
shows that are in that 8,000 to 20,000 range that are there, right? KublaCon's only at maybe 3,000, and then
I
PAX.
mean, you're
But
getting into territory where, and this is just my personal preference because I want things to be in Illinois because we have C2E2 and that's it.
sure,
Uh, there are perfect places, and this is just this is hold on, this is the Yale zone. Uh, I was upset when I heard it was moving to Milwaukee because I'm like, right down the street is Donald Stevens Convention Center, which used to host Wizard World when
right,
Wizard World was a viable, real thing and not a flea market. And so there's a lot of convention halls over there. I believe there's an anime convention over there as well.
yep,
ASIN used to be there, or it still is there. I can't remember anymore. But there's a lot of space out there. And I heard it was going to Milwaukee. I was so bummed because this was my first Adepticon, and I was like, it was free to get in, which blows my mind.
yep,
That is the smartest move. It gives me more money to spend at
yeah,
vendors.
totally. And it's like, and if you're not going to be playing any games and you're just going to buy, why wouldn't you have that, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is, they've got so many vendors that aren't able to attend because there's not enough space, right?
Yeah.
And so now you can get like I'm sure there are way more miniatures game companies that would love to attend, but because
Hmm.
of just how packed the thing is, that's it, right? So being able to move to a larger space is going to give them just more options for more stuff. Obviously, our games filled up a huge chunk of that stuff there, right? But like,
Right
I
up front.
yeah, but I go to Las Vegas Open every year out in Vegas, and they've got a 1,000 person 40K tournament. They do,
Wow.
right? And they've got they're kind of like the other show. If Coke is at Epicon, Pepsi's LVO, right? And so they've got all these major events too, where it's like a 300 person Age of Sigmar tournament, 300 person Star Wars Legion tournament. So, but also they've maxed out their space at the Rio, right? And so it's like, well, where else can you really go in Vegas? And it's like they're doing the Rio because it's cheap and it has that big ballroom space. But while they've
Hmm.
got maybe one more room they can go into, it's just more tables. They aren't able to expand out. So for Adepticon to be able to grow, they could like let's imagine what a 15,000 tabletop miniatures convention could look like, right? And like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
bet like once you start getting some celebrities coming in there, and like because you could have Sam Witwer and like Ruka Julia coming in there doing some painting classes and some signing stuff, and you could have some larger streaming things going on, and then even just some like general family paint and take hobby days. Like if you gave Ari Painter half the space and said, "Hey, let's make a family hobby day. What does that look like? Or
Yeah.
even Games Workshop. Like there's some things there that I think could be really cool. And I think Hank sees that too. So
Hmm.
I do a lot of stuff with Comic Con for tabletop. I can help out with tabletop programming. I help run the RPG Play Theater we did do for the last couple of years, and we're seeing a lot of tabletop programming grow out of that. And so, kind of in that like video games, comics, and tabletop stuff, more people are finding it, but they're really only on that like basic level of like, cool, we're playing D&D. We have Catan and Ticket to Ride, and we go to that. And then for miniatures games, there really isn't that intro outside of Warhammer. And once you see Warhammer, you're like, well, am I into Space Marines? Because if you're
You're
not into Space
overwhelmed.
Marines, then, and also even looking at a Space Marine, you're like, crap, there's 20 colors here, and there's these wolf dudes, and there's these green guys, and then everything is mildly double eagles and iron crosses. So that
Yeah.
has a thing to it, you know?
I within the past, I'd say 15 years within the gaming community, like tabletop gaming, not even role playing gaming, but like
Right.
you have things coming out like Zombicide, things like Blood Rage. Holy shit!
Oh, yeah.
Um, Betrayal at the House on the Hill. I always mess up that name. It's this weird meld of tabletop role playing games and like miniatures and stuff, and actual board gaming, which is kind of what BattleTech and 40K Warhammer kind of encompass in that
Right.
place. And so I kind of knew it had started blowing up when I would, for the 1 month I was working, or 2 months I was working at WizKids as a copywriter. Like they started really pushing out their kind of tabletop onslaught game. I'm like, okay, if Hasbro knows this is a thing, or WizKids and Hasbro knows the thing, then it's already super blown up underground.
Oh, yeah.
Like that's just how it goes.
And they like that with the onslaught stuff too, because that is just repackaging of their minis, right? So it's like,
Yeah,
cool. Now, even if you're not into the game, here's some mats, here's some terrain, here's minis, you're good to go. So it has like a double purchase. You're like, oh, cool, I like this tavern battle scene with these characters. I'll pick it up. But then also, here's a cool 5e based mechanic battle game where you can kind of learn how to play D&D at the same time. So it's for an intro product, a really cool idea. But
hmm,
then, like you bring up BattleTech, and it's like BattleTech's having its renaissance right now, right? Like
yeah,
it's amazing. Congrats to Randall and the whole team over at Catalyst, because like they've ran this whole Kickstarter the last couple of years that raised like $7 to $8 million, and they've got people that love historicals that are now able to play BattleTech, and it's that weird like they're not playing Napoleonics, but they're playing
yes,
the era of BattleTech that's essentially historicals, right? So, I mean, and GW's explored that too with the whole Horus Heresy thing, right? That's pretty much playing historicals just with Space Marines.
yeah.
But it's neat. So, like, it's funny you bring up Zombicide, right? So, I ran the first Zombicide Kickstarter when I used to work at
Oh,
Cool
oh,
Mini.
you're welcome. I was one of the people that funded it.
Yeah, awesome, right? Yeah, so that was like the different era of Kickstarter too, right? And we were back at it, you could just throw ads on Facebook, do a thing, and call it a day, and you would fund,
Hmm.
and you could do concept art stretch goals of non-IP infringing characters, and it was just a whole different world. But like you look at that game now, right? And like Cool Mini or Not can release Deceased, DCCeased or whatever, right? And then all those things there, and it just insta blows up, and there's a whole community around. I just need whatever's next for
Yeah,
Zombicide, right? And those miniatures for the board game quality they put out are a plus,
yes,
and they're cool, and they're uh, the material is solid enough where it's like if you drop it, it's not going to snap, but also
yeah,
it's not so soft that you're not getting detail out of it, and that's really neat. But I think what's on the other end of that too is there's a whole other community for miniatures games in that 3D printing area, right?
yes,
And you've got people that are just like doing minis at home, doing terrain at home, doing this at home. And so the whole culture itself as a miniatures gamer is there's so many facets now that are doing things. There's so many companies that I've been seeing that are literally just like Patreon models, right?
yeah,
And they're doing their download a Patreon, do a thing, STLs, you can get that all going. But yeah, it's just neat. To wrap that whole tangent up, like the miniature game community right now is in a really cool space, right? Because there's so anybody that wants to do something can do it. Uh, but at the same time, like The newest edition of 40K is out. People are gearing up for Age of Sigmar stuff. Our games are doing well. And so it's kind of, and I'm not speaking as an Atomic Mass Games person. I have my other Miss Ross hat on, right? But it's kind of, yeah, not sponsored, not
You
sponsored.
work for them, but we're not sponsored.
Yeah, right. So, but it's neat because, like, it's a cool time to be a miniatures gamer. I think quarantine really kind of made a lot of us realize that, oh yeah, I miss painting miniatures. Like I
Yeah.
painted 2 armies during quarantine, and I was like, oh yeah, I haven't had time to like literally do this since college,
Yeah.
and now I weave that back into my week where I'm like, I'm gonna build some minis tonight. I'm gonna paint some minis, and this is a hobby that I spend a lot of money on. I should be doing more of it.
I mean, that's what happened to me. I think right before the pandemic was, I was still at GameSpot. I'm at GameSpot now, but I was an editor back then. And
Not sponsored, not sponsored.
whatever, they pay me actually. Uh, and it was WizKids, V Muse. I've never had to pronounce her last name out loud, or her screen name, V Muse from
Yeah,
WizKids.
yeah, totally. And she's
Yeah,
awesome.
so
Yeah.
she is. She sent me a bunch of like Critical Role unpainted minis.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, "Hey, can you like talk about these or write about them?" I said, "No, like thanks for sending them. Like maybe I'll paint them as a gag." And she's like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "Well, I'm not a painter. I'm not an artist. I'm good with words. I'm terrible as an artist. So like I'll write up a thing about these, but I'm going to paint them and I'm going to make fun of my own ability to paint because that's funny to me, but I'm also promoting your product. That's just how I work as a editor or writer." So I started painting. I had the most tranquil, peaceful time doing it. And like I got done with my first model and like I took pictures and like looking back, I'm like, yeah, I put too much paint on it in spaces and like, yeah. But I got done with my first time, like holy shit, like this is not hard. I mean, it's not hard to get started.
Right.
And then you dump all the money into all the things and then you're stuck with multiple airbrushes. And then you get into, making textures and making buildings out of FPS foam and stuff.
Yep. Oh yeah. I mean, and that's kind of where that deep dive goes into, right? Like I was gearing up for a whole Star Wars campaign last year before I got hired by AMG. And I was like out buying Legion miniatures. Like, oh cool. Here's now I can go fight underworld characters and here's a whole box of of just like different stuff. I'm like, oh, here's my stormtroopers, here's my this, here's my that. I'm good to go. And it's kind of funny how that all preps, but like at the same time, like painting miniatures, what it does is it makes you slow down, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're so rushed that we got to like gotta go. What are you producing? What are you doing? Where when you paint a mini, your brain just will not let you go that fast because you're like, great, I need to make sure I get the paint, get the brush, get the thing, do all that, and then you're focused on this little thing, and it's awesome. Like what you're thinking about while you're working on it, I mean, we can get into a whole men's health conversation about that too, right? But it's just
Easily.
like, but painting is wonderful, and so it's great.
I think the problem I had was I got way too. First of all, like when I was working with WizKids, they would send me boxes of stuff.
Yeah.
And within journalism, I've discussed this on the show many, many times with other journalists. You get a lot of stuff sent to you whether you write about it or not. That's just the game, and sometimes you write about it, and that's great. Like I wrote about Warlock tiles once, but then WizKids kept sending me Warlock tiles. So now I have a ton of Warlock tiles. But they would send me boxes of unpainted miniatures knowing that I was doing painting. I'm like, cool. And I would just start buying more and more paints. I had like a giant army painter like set I bought to get into
totally.
like Vallejo. I did a deep dive into Vallejo, which ruined my bank account for a little while. And then Turbo Dork came along and I was like, oh my God, paints that are weird and different lights,
Yeah, right. I got a whole bunch of their stuff right here, right? So yeah,
I was so happy to see them at Adepticon. Like they had paints I had never seen before in the fatter bottles.
Oh yeah, good.
And I was so pumped. Like
Here's
I don't think anybody's ever
range
seen me that
Dorito
pumped.
flavors, right? So
I believe I did get like a Cool Ranch Dorito type flavor.
Yeah.
But it's such a vast and wide hobby that I really feel like became a boom, more of a mainstream boom, like again, thanks to things like Kickstarter with Zombicide being, I think, the first really big board game to come out of that,
It
followed
was.
by yeah, up until, which I will hold dearly in my heart, Blood Rage is one of the best games I've ever like put money down on at
Oh,
Kickstarter,
for sure.
easily
And,
hands down.
and Eric Lang would say thank you very much, right? So, which is great. And that game's it's awesome. Though I still have my Chaos in the Old World, but I will say that game has not aged as well as I would have liked it to, right? So, it's just Blood Rage is just a better version of that, right? So,
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
but it's funny because gaming has evolved so much in the last bit.
yeah.
I was reading an article today on MSNBC, and they interviewed a woman who is a professional DM, and they were talking about her uh, cash avenues on how she has stuff on Start Playing and how she does stuff locally for a group, and then she works for an event company and how she's making, like a decent living. And it's like we will have friends who work in the space and do things like that, or they're performing and whatever and all of that. But it's like, here's somebody that is she just plays, she just runs D&D, and that's her thing. And she make like, her and her husband, they make a solid living. And MSNBC had a cool little, like, here's the breakdown of their finances, here are how many games she's run, here's what this is, here's why this even is a thing, right? Because they were talking about like how Critical Role does all this stuff, and there's D&D there. And so it's amazing that we're in a nerd space right now where somebody that's not even like part of the inner trade industry of that, but just runs D&D for people, right? And that's cool. People are
Yeah.
paying for this like experience where they're going to castles to play D&D, and they're doing cruises for D&D. But let's say you and I just like wanted to play a game, and we want a dungeon master. We've got time because we have a job potentially,
Mhm.
right? But we don't have the time to get somebody to DM and do a whole thing. Well, if we pay somebody $20 a session, we get 5 of us. Now she's going to run us through a 4-hour game on Tuesdays, and we're going to get a really cool rundown, So,
But that's the nice thing about the explosion of
yeah.
TTRPGs was, I remember playing in high school and a little after high school. This is like 1999 and 2001, where you would have to beg people to play. And we're doing THACO at this point. 3.0 had
Oh,
just
so chunky,
recently
so
come out.
chunky. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And getting people to play was so hard. So hard. I still play with the original 4 people I played with back then. Currently, we have more people that come in and rotate out.
Sure.
But the fact that D&D is not only a great real movie that just came out 2 years ago, I'm not joking. That's not sarcastic.
Oh, it's so good. It's so
It
good.
it got the game. It understands the game. But the fact that like 5e, for what you can say about the positives and negatives of Hasbro and Dungeons and Dragons, whatever. But 5e made it so popular and easily accessible that like it just made the whole space grow.
Yeah.
And it's just been like so awesome to see that in the past 10 years or so.
10 years is about the best way to put it, right? Because I've been in the industry working for about 15,
Okay.
right? And I ran like I ran Zombicide at my second job, right?
Mhm.
And that was like 14 years ago, 13 years ago ish. So it's weird when you like look at that progression from then, because Kickstarter had that all stuff, which held everything there. But then D&D, when they hit that 5th edition boat, that blew up. And then for Warhammer, them having, I think it was like 9th edition 40K had a big push, but then when we hit the, and everything there, so it's just been a trip, because like there's certain instances where it's getting big. The D&D movie obviously was really good, but
Mhm.
like I'm sure Warhammer's prepping for when that Amazon show drops with Henry Cavill.
Oh,
You
that's
know,
going to be super huge. I mean,
it's
it's
it.
Amazon's doing really good stuff. If you've watched like Invincible or Fallout, like I feel like they understand the properties they're working with much better than other streaming services.
Oh yeah, totally right. And so, I mean, I Fallout. We could do the whole thing up. Like Fallout did what I wanted to do, right? Where it was just taking a
Mhm.
brand and taking a world and telling a story.
Mhm.
And if they do that with Warhammer 2, where they just like, hey, we're not going to tell a set story, we're just going to tell something in the world, then all the hardcores aren't going to be judging it based on their own interpretation of a certain character's story. and now we're just going to get something new, like Space Marine, right? Captain Titus doing his thing and all that. We didn't need Rupert Gilliman and his story of the Ultramarines doing his stuff. We got our own story, doing our own thing, and that's great. Even with, oh my gosh, the Doom game they made for Warhammer,
Spice Wars.
Bolt gun, right? Same thing. We're just going to drop a new Space Marine down on a world, do a thing, nuke it up. Everyone loves it. So if they can take that kind of thing and then tell that versus like retelling a Space Hulk or a Necromunda story, just make up your own story, do your own thing. Perfect, because then you can have the Easter eggs be world bits and nods and story things there, instead of trying to Avatar: The Last Airbender and trying to retell an already really good story again. Why? Right? Like, so if they can do that, then the Warhammer nerds will instead be welcoming versus gatekeeping, right? And I feel like the D&D movie did a really good job of being welcoming. And it was just like, here's D&D. It's got Chris Pine. It's got Hugh Grant. We're being funny and cheeky. And there were like 4 or 5 rules things they got kind of wrong, right? Like Ed Greenwood had a pretty good video he came out with where he was like, hey, I built this world. I built these spells. Here's the things they got wrong. But he prefaced with like, I actually have no issues at all with this whole movie and it was amazing. And he's like, but if I was going to, well, actually, he's like, here's the 4 things they got wrong with that. And he's like, and I'll go into why they can't do that with those spells. But he's like, but I loved it and it was great. And it was like, yeah, because like our moms can watch it and go, oh, that's the D&D thing you do. And it's like, yeah, pretty much actually, right? Like we'll do a plan, do a thing. Oh, somebody died. We're going to bring him back and do all that. Does it make sense? Nah,
No, it doesn't. And I think the only people I saw that got really upset with that movie were people that take D&D a little too seriously in their gaming sessions. My friends and I have always we play D&D like Hackmaster is the best way to say it. Like, yeah, it's just you're hanging out with your friends. Half of us have quit drinking and we're sober. There's like 2 people in the group left that drink. So we're all just hanging out. I'm enjoying my LaCroix, my LaCroix, and we're just eating chips and we're just making dumb jokes. It's bonding for friends, and you just happen to tell a story along the way with characters.
Totally, and like you can have your crunchy moment. Like, oh, I really want to make sure my character can do this really cool thing and do all that. So I was running a game about a year ago. We had to end it because one of our buddies moved. But when I DM, I have a survey I have my players fill out, right? Where I'm like, hey, what are 5 things your character knows and does? What are 4 things they don't know? What are 3 secrets they have? What's 2 secrets that they have but they don't know? Like that kind of stuff there, because that helps me kind of weave in a lot of those things into that. But now I can kind of like drop those in as we're playing. And then now everybody feels like, oh my gosh, we're building the story along with you and the world and all of that. But at the same time, we're just messing around, right? There's like times where it's like, oh, like I want to get up on that ship and it's an airship and we're going to do these things. And I'm like, cool, make like an athletics roll and then a strength check, right? Like, and if you rolled crappily, I guess you can't do parkour. But if you roll amazing, then yeah, you jump up on the thing, do a side move, and go up there. We're not going to go deep diving on like the rules of this, right? You want to hold a second action to prep your dagger? Sure, man. Like I'm not gonna rules junk you here. So we're just playing D&D. We're not live streaming for a game or a whole thing. Which if we're gonna get on that, man, like I could talk about tabletop entertainment versus tabletop education content. Like it's my job. It's my job. So
please roll to educate.
Yeah, well, I mean, pretty much, right? Like there's a different like the difference between Critical Role and Rodney Smith. It's very interesting, right? Because Critical Role is Critical Role. It's a whole brand. It's a whole thing. But it's entertainment, right? They can fill out stadiums. Dimension 20 can fill out stadiums. That's rad, right? We're paying to be entertained like we would a rock show. But then they're not going to be hiring Dimension 20 for a how to play D&D video, right?
Yeah.
Where you're going to get Rodney Smith and he's going to go, great, today we're going to learn Wormspan from Stonemaier Games. Here's the video. And it's, classic, wonderfully, just Canadian Rodney Smith, who's going to Mr. Rogers us through how to play this board game. And
which I need that.
Yeah, totally. Well, everyone needs that because now the fact that like board games are being sold Amazon, Target, and local game stores, everybody's buying these things. but we're not all rulebook learners, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
we need somebody to teach us this thing and do us this stuff. And
Do you have
that's
your
like,
designated person that reads all the rules to the group? Because we have ours.
yeah, my buddy Alex. I've noticed I was like 12, one of my best friends. We were roommates for a long time. He can't sit by me when I'm giving demos of a game at a show. Because like he'll correct me when I'm like, Alex, no, go away. But yeah, but he's a rules guy. He's a rules guy. And then for when we're doing miniature war games, I've got two other buddies and we're all playing together. We all like roughly know the rules, but then we'll be like, Tony, what's the rule on this thing with this gun and this thing and all of that. So, which is fun. I mean, like that's no one's gonna know every rule. We're just not gonna know it. So
No, at the same time, like we're deep into like we started in October playing Pulp Cthulhu,
oh,
not for the
cool.
first time, but we've just kept going for months now because we like the mechanics more.
Right.
We've been playing D&D for 20 years, so we like the mechanics more because it's new, it's different. But I don't think any of us know the full rules, so we just kind of you play as you go. You have a basic understanding of the
Yep.
world and how the mechanics work. But sometimes I just kind of like playing outside of the rule book. Like we did that with D&D for years. Just because you want to house rule it up a little, and sometimes the rules within the book are a little just too stringent and don't allow
Yeah.
you the full play space that you want,
But also like
depending on the player.
no one's going to come in and tell you you're playing wrong. And I say
Mhm.
that with an asterisk, right? Because like the internet will, obviously. But um, who cares, right? You're not playing for money. You're not playing as an official thing where the rules got to be right. And if we're all hanging out and we all agree, hey, this works. Like for a miniatures game, you want to get the rules right. Play a board game, you want to get the rules right. I have a much more casual aspect when it comes to role playing games. I'd rather us all have a
Mhm.
good time around the table than being stringent on, well, this one rule for this one spell works this way. So like does your wizard keep all their spell components with them? How much food do you bring when you're walking, right? Like what's the like come on now, right? So
I've
uh
been playing as a paladin for like 23 years. Paladin is my go-to character because there's so many different variations on how you can
sure.
play a paladin. I've never once had a spell component.
Yeah.
Never once.
Well, your god grants you the ability to just do that, so you're good.
That's what we just say. There are certain spells or unique components. I'm like, this is stupid. Like for me, I'm like, I no. How many arrows do I have? I don't know. I went to store and bought arrows. How many food rations? Let's not worry about this unless we're doing hardcore mode or
Unless we're
something.
doing some hardcore, like, hey, now we're going to dungeon crawl and do a thing where everything matters, and we're doing that. But now, I swear, if I'm going to do a new dungeon crawl game, we're all going to watch Dungeons and Dungeon first and be like, I want to know how to cook these monsters if we're going to do this thing, right? So,
Wait a minute, have you played in my games? Because we spend a lot of time on cooking and eating and less on actually fighting or exploring.
oh my gosh! So I was in a game during quarantine, and we were stuck in a time bubble, and
Mhm.
we had two DMs for the game, and we could go back to certain days because they would just if anybody died, it would reset. So we had
Mhm.
every single day that we'd gone to anywhere pre-saved. But we had certain days where the DM was tracking shipments of food that were coming into the town for certain restaurants. So we would go to certain restaurants on certain days when the certain food arrived so that we could, like, because you got to know when your favorite food truck shows up, right? So that was a
Mhm.
whole thing we would like track and do. And we started leaving. This is so dumb. It was how we ended up finding that the newspaper was corrupt was because we started sending in food reviews of the restaurants as like a joke and then realized that the DM then used us doing that to like push that storyline that the newspaper was corrupt. And that was how we found out that it was a whole issue. We had to go down there because our reviews weren't getting posted, damn it. And we're going to find out why these reviews aren't getting posted. So that ended being a whole thing. And it was like, wow, what a silly, very silly thing. But he had all these menus and these things and everything up. And it's like, yeah, that's what I wanted to do today was just role play some brunch. Right. So
You want joy. Like in our
yep.
Pulp Cthulhu game, I play as a detective and I have like Eddie Valiant detective. Like he's down on his luck. Like he's not very good at what he does, but I keep a journal with me during the session and I write out everything we do, but only from his point of view. And he's kind of a
Oh, great.
scumbag. So most of it is like we went on a dining car on a train. I had Jello because it's the 1930s and everything's Jello.
Yeah.
And the whole group, we spend so much time discussing what we're going to eat. The fact of the matter is, and I'm going to make you do this at the end, there is a spinoff on this show for Patreon subscribers that's based out of a Pulp Cthulhu thing that happened.
Okay.
Like, because we'll do it at the end after this is done.
Sure.
I keep forgetting to do that. But I think it's like when you find that joy with friends within that certain aspect of role playing, whether it be characters eating food or characters doing fantasy cocaine, as we used to call it, you find that group, and like that's to me the importance of like role playing games. It's not so much playing the game; it's just camaraderie around friends.
And that's what tabletop gaming is, right? And I think, that is, I think, why we're seeing such a huge, not even resurgence, but just like a huge swelling of people playing games. I think the favorite question ever get, what's the biggest trend in gaming lately, Ross? Right? Like what's going on? Is it more themes? Is it more IPs? Is it more mechanics? For the last few years, I've been saying it's more butts and seats, right? More people are playing games than ever. And everyone's like, oh, the bubble's going to burst eventually. And I'm like, no way, because the bubble's still expanding. Like, the best thing you can do is keep making games that are good and then keep selling them because people want to buy them. Like and especially like our whole industry, games and entertainment in general is very cult of new, right? Like new. But there's so many games from the last like 12 years that are still great, like King Domino and Medici, and I could list a whole bunch. We've already listed Homicide, right? But like once you play those things, you're like, great. And then for people that are actively buying board games with giant board game shelves, they're going to be like, oh, I got to buy the new thing and do whatever. And they're going to back the latest Kickstarter, and that's going to do a thing, and that's fine. But if we just got into board games, we got Ticket to Ride and Catan at a 2-for-1 Target sale, right? And now we're there, we played it, and we're like, oh, I got to go look into more board games. They're going to type in new board games like Ticket to Ride into Google or to ChatGPT or whatever, right?
Best board games of the year are best board games to play for adults,
right?
That aren't sexy.
Total, sure, but it's interesting because like that's some of the hottest content, which I'm sure you could talk about too for journalism stuff. But it's like it's always those lists, right? Top 10 lists for 2024, right? Like for board games.
I rate so much of that shit, and I mean shit in a positive way because I like doing it.
Right, but it's like people need that, right? Like I have my go-to games of what I buy for gifts and for game. Like in that bag I've got right there, like that's my go-to grab bag when I go to stuff. I have not added a game into that in about a year. But like for that, like the newest game I think I've bought where I've actually added to my list has been Flamecraft. Have you played Flamecraft yet?
No.
Oh, go get it. So Flamecraft is you're helping cute dragons get jobs in a fantasy town. And it also comes with miniatures that you can paint, and they're adorable little miniatures that are super cute. But it's just a fun little like Manny Vega designed it. He was on one of my panels at WonderCon a couple weeks ago. But it's a super cute game. It's there. The art's really great. And funny story in this game too is there was an art piece around on the internet where there was a witch at a cafe, and the waiter had brought out a dragon, and the dragon was creme brulee. There was a little bit of flame on that, so they went and found that artist, and then had her do a whole board game. And it big hit, super fun. But it's like that game is going to keep doing well for a while because it's got that D&D mesh with it. It's easy to do. The components are tight and they look really poppy. And it's like, that's great, right? We should keep doing that. But at the same time, one of our friends can make some easy little card game thing that's 80 cards doing some fun little Business Walrus something or Exploding Kittens
Exploding Cats,
yeah, right. And that'll blow up and do really great too. So it's like there's so many new ideas that are happening. And I think the next big trend that it's not even a trend, it's happening, is more folk are getting into games that aren't the established people, right? And so we're seeing more people that just haven't been playing games for 20 years that are now discovering games and doing these things. And they're bringing new ideas into design and all of that, which I love seeing. I do a lot of mentorship for like marketing and stuff like that. And a lot of the stuff I'm teaching is a lot of like the 101 stuff. Like You should join Gamma. You should join these press lists. You should get in these Facebook groups and just learn a lot of the information that we've all been learning over the last decade. Like nothing's really new in this space, like there's new contacts and things, but like you're going to get it manufactured. It's going to do this thing. You're going to get it shipped. It's going to go on distro. You're going to go to a game store and you're going to buy it, repeat, right? Like, so, but it's cool. And there's more folk getting into it. And I think as we get more people into this space, whether it's role-playing games, miniatures games, board games, card games, that's only going to get better, So I'm looking forward to that.
Me as well, Ross. This is where we do the whole, hey, plug your things.
Funny enough, I'm not going to promote work. We're already good. I'm going to promote. If you want to learn more about tabletop games and you want to get into tabletop jobs, I run this jobs group with Jessica Fisher called Tabletop Game Jobs on Facebook. And we post up job openings in the gaming industry there, and a lot of publishers post it up too. So that's definitely a really good group to go join if you're going to get into the gaming space. Check it out. It's cool. I'm in it. So if you got questions, poke me on there. And I think that's a good thing to promote. So, yeah.
Look at that. Well, thank you for coming on, Ross.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for inviting me. I'm glad we could do this.
Yeah. So. I mean, my family's out of town and I'm home alone. So I don't know what to do. When you're 42 and don't do much, what do you do on a Thursday night? Interview Ross Thompson.
Hey, I'm happy. It's funny because my parents literally were like, hey, you want to get sushi? And I'm like, no, I gotta be on a podcast.
All right, that's it. See you next week.
Later, everybody. Thanks so much.